may be in part due to their ability to reconcile with their enemies after conflict. The authors say these efforts to patch up differences ensure males can then cooperate more successfully in the future. BBC News.
This is World Business Report from the BBC World Service. I'm Charlotte Trudasla. Britain's central bank is taking decisive action in the wake of Britain's exit from the European Union. It's announced the first interest rate cut in 7 years, but will it prevent Britain sliding into recession?
A cut in interest rates, as well as other measures, is necessary to stimulate demand and therefore economic growth. And in that respect, most people and most firms in the economy would be winners from an increase in economic growth.
We'll get reaction from the US to the decision.
There was a generally favourable reaction. Mr. Carney has very good press here. Somebody called him the adult at the party. So generally what he does is well received here.
And are you spending too much time online?
I'm usually on Facebook, a bit on Instagram, some Twitter, some Snapchat.
We'll hear from those taking a digital detox. Cristiano Ronaldo was Manchester United's top scorer. Slumdog Millionaire was the hot film of the moment, and the Bank of England had cut interest rates to their lowest for more than 300 years. That was 2009, 7 years ago. The world was in the midst of a global recession and financial markets were in turmoil when UK interest rates fell to 0.5%. Today, the Bank of England announced that interest rates will be cut again to 0.25%, and the Governor, Mark Carney, went even further than predicted by holding out the prospect of rates falling to zero. Mr. Carney also announced that the bank will expand its quantitative easing program by buying $80 billion of UK government bonds and $12 billion of corporate bonds. The bank was under pressure to act after surveys suggested a sharp fall in economic activity in July after the EU referendum. Here's the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney explaining the move.
We took these steps because the economic outlook has changed markedly. By acting early and comprehensively, the MPC can reduce uncertainty, bolster confidence, blunt the slowdown, and support the necessary adjustments in the UK economy. The degree and composition of that stimulus is largely determined by the effects of the vote to leave the EU on demand, supply, and the exchange rate.
So, who are the winners and losers? I asked Philip Shaw, chief economist at asset managers Investec.
The direct winners from a cut in interest rates borrowers, where you'd expect borrowers' interest rates to fall. And of course, savers are on the other side of that coin. You'd expect at least some savers to suffer some reductions in their savings. But those are the direct beneficiaries, and those that don't benefit from it. It's important to realise that, certainly from the perspective of the Bank of England, the UK economy is weakening, and that a cut in interest rates, as well as other measures, is necessary to stimulate demand and therefore economic growth. And in that respect, most people and most firms in the economy would be winners from an increase in economic growth.
There's a global interest in the UK avoiding recession. Various markets around the world and economies and central banks will be looking at how this will impact them. How do you see it from where you're sitting?
Well, there was a fear in world markets just after the vote to leave the European Union that there could be a big fear in global markets that this sort of referendum could gain ground elsewhere in the world, and there was a big negative reaction, for example, in stock markets. But things have settled down considerably since then. The degree of panic has eased back. Markets are looking more towards the US economy and American corporate earnings as the big driver of global stock markets, and we've had good news on the whole on those fronts, and therefore global stock markets have recovered.
There has been a downgrade, though, from the Bank of England's forecast of economic growth. Quite considerable, from 2.3 to 0.8.
Absolutely. I think that it's important to recognise that the Bank of England's new economic forecasts take on board policy actions that it's announced today, and therefore that had we not had a cut in interest rates or more quantitative easing, for example, the Bank of England would be forecasting GDP growth to be a lot lower in the UK, and possibly actually adopting a central economic view that the UK would move into recession.
Now, if we this out to Europe and Asia, Switzerland, for example, and Japan, both their central banks have cut their rates to negative. What's your view on this global trend of negative rates?
I'm not convinced it's a
trend. There certainly are several central banks around the world that do have their main policy rate in negative territory. One of the big problems with negative rates is that it puts a lot of pressure on commercial banks, specifically because commercial banks really can't charge people for their savings. People might get 0% interest, but really, I think charging for holding cash for individuals is not going to be on the cards. So if banks have to lower their lending rates, then their margins are very much squeezed, the lower rates fall, and that's particularly the case when the main central bank policy rate is negative, as is, for example, in the euro area. Now, what we heard from the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney earlier this afternoon was that he's very much the UK bankrate the main policy rate into negative territory. So what we may well see over the next 3 months or so is that if the economy shows further signs of weakening, then the Monetary Policy Committee could lower interest rates again, but not into negative territory.
Philip Shaw, Chief Economist at Asset Managers Investec. The cut of interest rates marks a reversal for the Bank of England, which before the Brexit vote had been expected to follow the US Central Bank in raising interest rates later